Hi, this is Steve here, my workshop in Bellevue, Nebraska. This is a new series that I'm starting today. It's called Advanced Methods. And I'm doing this in honor of getting 500 subscribers. I'm over 500 subscribers now on the Shops with Mark 47520 channel. And so starting next year, I will have the option of people having paid memberships starting in 2025. And one of the requirements, though, is you will have to have completed the self-study course first, and that's the 10 lessons that I'm producing this year. And that's because the advanced class requires a lot more extra equipment, a lot more attention to detail, and you're just going to be doing much more advanced. So you've got to have those basic skills already done. And I know some of you are going to say, oh, I've been doing this for years and years. And I'm sure you have, but there's certain things that you're going to learn in the basic course that you probably don't already know, or that you're probably not already doing. So there's going to be certain techniques and safety issues. So I want to make sure that everyone that does the advanced methods classes and courses and videos, that you really do know what you're doing, so that we're all on the same page. So today, this first one's going to be free. You're not going to have to, anybody can watch this first one. And this first one is on doing pocket screw holes. And I've done, these are through 3 pocket hole screws here. And you see these are nice and clean. You see how nice and clean the edges are on those. And of course, those are done when you have a tabletop where you have an apron that goes under it and it's going to attach to it. And of course, you can see these screws, they're not going to go up through the top of the table. So there's a lot of detail to getting these right to do pocket screw holes. It's not just a matter of doing the pockets down like you see here. You see, these are pretty ragged edges on this one. These are very poorly done pocket hole screws. And we don't even have these ones here. We don't even have the shank holes. They're not even going all the way through. So there's still more to be done on those, but I wouldn't even use these because they're such jagged edges. Now, the reason those are so jagged edges is because the drill bit that was used on those was not sharp. To do effective, clean pocket hole screws, you got to have super sharp brad point bits. And this one here is a brand new brad point bit. It's super sharp. I did the other ones here on a brad point bit. I did these on one that I've been using for probably 25, 30 years and have never sharpened. So that's the difference right there. All right, so to get started, we're going to start with the machine in drill press mode, and I'm going to show you how we're going to set this up to do the pocket hole screws, because there's quite a bit involved with this. This video will be a bit longer than the other videos you're used to seeing also. So that's another thing about the advanced videos. You know, in the shorter ones that you've seen in the self-study course, none of those are more than 35 minutes, and some are as short as 5 minutes. The ones here in the advanced series, they're going to be probably most of them a half hour or longer. So let's start with setting up here for the pocket screws. And I'm going to take these things off here. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this bit out to the one I'm going to need for the pocket hole screws. And that is a 5/16, because that's the perfect head size of the number 8 by 1 1/4 inch screw, which is a number 8 by 1 1/4 is the screw you should use for pocket holes. Not a number 10, not a number 6, not a 1 1/2 inch screw. You want to have it to be that exact screw. And that's specifically for stock that's anywhere from a 1/2 inch up to 1 inch in thickness. That's what those screws are designed for, that you want to use on pocket holes. So I've got that in there now. We won't need the backer board for doing these. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to take up the legs, because we've got to make this table a different position. And we want to make sure that this is loose here. We don't want that tight because we've got to move the table. Now we're going to actually take the fence itself. We want to move it over to this side of the bit. Next thing, we have this jig here, which mounts on the side of the fence with T-bolts. The battery in my microphone died, so the remainder here is going to be done with this voiceover. Now here you see me taking the fence. I put it upside down. It's adjustable, so it can only go on one way, so that's why I flipped it over. And here you see me attach that to the fence, and I'm positioning so it will go right down into that miter gauge slot. We want that. That's going to provide support for the fence so it can't slip at all when we exert pressure on it, just like when we did horizontal boring. And here I've locked the fence in position there on the table now. The next thing that's going to happen is it's going to put this table in so that we can tilt it. We want to tilt it to 15 degrees. For our pocket holes, we can be anywhere between 15 and 20 degrees. 15 degrees is the preferred angle for doing pocket holes for aprons on tables. And now I'm adjusting the table as I tilt that. Now that I've got that set at 15 degrees, I'm moving the table in. Now I'm going to put my spacer board on here. This is 1 1/4 inch thick. That should be the maximum thickness you do for the spacer board there. And you notice I've got 2 notches that I have put in there with the router. They're 3/8 inch wide notches. And the MDF that goes on top of it has 2 dowels down in it, 3/8 dowels, that'll fit inside those channels so that that MDF can slide back and forth to accommodate whatever thickness of stock that I have, anywhere from a 1/2 inch up to 1 inch works well for this particular setting. Now what I've done is I put a line 3/8 inch in from that edge, that's where I want to have the tip of the brad point touch, because our stock is 3/4 inch thick, so we want the screws to come out right in the middle of that edge. So that's why that line is put at 3/8. Right there you see the screw coming out right in the middle, which is the center of that is 3/8 inch from the edge of the stock. What we're going to do now is we're going to use that line on that spacer there to position our table. So we'll move the table in or out and advance the quill until that point is right on that line exactly. That'll get us our exact spacing. Once that's there, then we can retract the quill. Now this is the stop that Shopsmith sells that I use on the fence. I'm using that on the left end here because when that drill bit is drilling in, it will have a tendency to push that to the left. The MDF that's in there, when the bit comes down through that, the action of the turning bit will want to push it to the left. So that's why we put the stop there on the left end to keep it from moving to the left when the bit tries to move it. You notice there also that there is a hole already in the MDF. That's because I've used that previously for doing pocket holes. Once you've done the first hole, you can reuse that same position every single time for all of your future pocket holes. So you see there that slides right into the notch there that I've done in the spacer board with the dowels that are sitting down from there. Now I'm lining up so that that bit will go exactly into that hole there that I've done previously. When I get it there, then I will make sure that the left end stop is up butting against the spacer board that's there. And I tighten that down. Now nothing can move to the left from the bit. Now the stock there is between the MDF and the table. Here I'm talking about the bit wanting to push away from the stock because of that angle. And that's what the MDF does. The MDF, when we push against that, keeps that bit from wandering away from the stock. On your portable jigs like Craig has, that's what that jig does. It performs the same identical function. Now what I'm going to do at this point is have drawn 3 lines across the edge of that first piece of stock, and that showed the position where I drilled those particular pocket hole screws. I'm going to transfer those lines over to my fresh piece of stock just to make it easier for positioning. So I'm removing those screws right now from the first piece that the pocket holes have already been done. Those particular screws, when you screw them down, when they hit the bottom, they just keep turning. They don't advance anymore. But I'm pulling those back up so I could just set the stock flat there and transfer my lines over to the other piece of stock with a small square that I have there in my apron. The other thing you're going to notice on these advanced methods videos is you don't see me wearing the Shopsmith apron on these. That's deliberate. Here I'm transferring those lines with my mechanical pencil. It's got a 0.5 millimeter pencil lead in it. I like using those. You get a consistent line every time. So now that my lines are drawn, I put the stock there behind the MDF. Now right where that hole is through the edge of the MDF, there is a line that goes directly through the middle of that. And we line that line on the MDF with the line we've done on our stock so we get our exact positioning where we want to have our pocket hole in our stock. You notice me there, I'm putting another stop there on the right end so that the jig cannot move to the left or to the right in any way whatsoever. Now a little bit later here, you'll see me trying some different ways to hold the stock in position so it does not move to the right, because the bit, its rotation wants to move that to the right. Now what I'm talking about here is setting the right depth. We want to have about 1/2 to 9/16 of depth left. So to get that set properly, we take and we advance the quill until the spurs touch the spacer stock there. At that point, on the dial, I set the dial to 0, as you can see there. And then I will take off the quill lock and I'll retract it exactly 9.5/16. When it gets to when I get exactly to retracted 9.5/16, I lock the quill, and now I turn my depth stop to 0. And that gets me my proper depth so that I'm leaving about 9.5/16 of depth in the stock, and that's where the shank hole is going to be. Now that I have my depth set properly, I can go ahead and cut my first pocket hole. So the first thing I thought I would do before we drill those holes is we need to have a way to hold that MDF and stock against the table so it doesn't push away from the table. And that's what these two featherboards are that you're seeing here. And these are a special accessory that Shopsmith sells, and it attaches to the top of the fence, and then we can position that as close or as far away from the fence as we need to for our particular application. So here I'm sliding the first one into the T-slot on the top edge of the fence with the fingers going to the left, and I do it all the way until it runs into that stop that I put on earlier, and I raise the featherboard up so it's as further away from the fence as possible, and then I put the other one on. This one I have the fingers pointing to the right instead of to the left. And the adjustment on that is the same as the first one. And I will just butt that right against the first one, raise it up as high as it can go, and lock the two knobs on each of them on the fence. Now the reason the maximum height of that spacer board is 1 1/4 inches, because if it's any higher than that, then these fingers on the featherboards will not be able to go in and hit the MDF. They will run into the spacer board instead. So that's why the limitation on the thickness on that. Now I'm advancing those featherboards to put pressure against the MDF, which in turn puts pressure against the stock. And when it's time to drill these, I will press just a little bit at the top of that MDF against the bit, and that'll give us our clean hole. But before that, we need to put a stop on the right end of the stock so that the bit doesn't want to try and move that stock to the right when it goes into it. That's another reason you saw some of those ragged edges on the poorly done pocket holes. That's because those did not have a stop on it to hold it in position to keep it from moving. So the first thing I tried here was seeing if I could put something in the T-slot on the table itself to go down in that space, and I just was not successful doing that. So after that, you'll see what the final solution is. It's another accessory that Shoutsmith sells. It's an extension for your fence. So you can move have your stops out even further away if you need to. And it conveniently also will fit into the table slot, as you see right here. And that's what I'm doing. I'm putting it into the table slot instead of on top of the fence where it is actually originally designed to go. But rather than take that bit out, I'm just going to slide it in from the other end. And then it'll go in just fine. Now, I originally thought doing this that I might be able to put a stop in there and have it fit in that space between the MDF and the stock, but I found out that that just would not work. So I ended up putting another piece of stock in there as a spacer, and that ends up working, as you'll see. So that's where I tried the stop alone to see if that would fit down there, and it did not. So now here I'm looking for another piece of stock to fit in there. First one I tried a little bit too wide. So here's where we come up with the final solution. And I put another piece of stock, just like the one I already have in there, as a spacer. Now that I put the fence extension back in the main table, and now I'm putting the stop on the fence extension and adjusting that so that that's right up against the spacer piece that I put in there. There you can see. This ends up being the final solution. Now I'm going down, adjusting my legs again, back down so they touch the floor for support. Double checking everything. And now I turn on the power. And I set my setting on here for 1/4 to 1/2 brad point bit, soft wood, which should be about 1,000 RPM. And here you see me pressing in on the MDF at the top there. And what happens here is I discovered that for some reason, even though I did not select reverse, the machine is actually turning in reverse here. And so would not advance into the stock. Now this is not the first time I've had that happen. I've had that happen a couple other times. I think it's some kind of fault in the electronics that happens periodically. In any case, I go back and reset it, and this next time the drill chuck turns in the correct direction instead of reverse direction, and it works just fine. So I'm resetting. It's what here. So here we are. This time, now it's turning in the correct direction. No change in settings. Just went back and reset it. Just advance it until it hits the stop. Now I stop the stock there. Now I'm going to take out my spacer, and I'm going to advance the stock down to my next line for my next pocket hole. Sometimes it's just easier to blow off the dust than it is to get a vacuum or take a brush and brush it off. Now I can use the stop directly now that the stock has advanced that far. And I will be able to do the same thing on the next one as well. So now we're doing the second pocket hole. And we'll advance and do the third one. Same way. Pocket holes really are a nice thing to be able to do. In this particular video on advanced methods, the only time you see these being done is on fine furniture, where you're going to put an apron on the underside of a table top. And here I am doing the third one. Now after we're done with this, we're going to need to do the shank hole to get it all the way through the rest of the stock. And for doing that, we will use our 11/64 6-inch aircraft twist bit. And you'll see me here in a minute. I'm going to show the difference between the aircraft twist bits and the ones that are called jobber length twist bits. The ones that you get in your sets that you buy are always jobber length. And on those, the smaller the diameter of the bit, the shorter the length of the bit is. But on the aircraft ones, and they're named that because they're used quite frequently in the aircraft industry, they can come in anywhere from 6, 12, even up to 18 inches in length. And so what we're going to use here is an 11/64 bit that is 6 inches long, ½ inch longer than your brad point drill bits. So there it is right there. That's 6 inches long. And now I'm going to go get a jobber length, the one that comes in your twist bit set, and I'll show you the difference there, how much shorter that is. You have to have these longer ones to do pocket holes. Reason being, if you try to do it with the short one, the chuck itself will run into the stock before you get it down to the proper depth. So now I'm going to change this bit out to the 11/64 twist bit. We won't need the featherboards for this next 3 holes. We're just going to drill this right down through the center of the 3 holes that we already did. We don't need any special fixtures to hold those in place. We just do those with our hands. So here I'm putting in the 11/64 all three holes as usual. You want to make sure you have make sure it's centered and that it's tight. Now this time we want it to go all the way through the stock, so I'm going to advance the bit until it just barely touches that spacer board, and that's where my zero is going to be. I don't need it to penetrate into the spacer board, just barely touching it. And here I'm setting that to 0, retracting it. Now I will go back and reset my speed. This time I'm going to do up to 1/4 inch for twist bits into softwood, and that'll give me 1800 RPM for that one. And this is easy to do by eye. You've got your line on the top of the edge. You can see where the hole is. You can see where that bit is. You can easily center it in that pocket hole by eye. So now I've reset my speed, and we're going to do these 3 shank holes. And here's our last shank hole now. Now you see why we need those long bits there. Can you imagine if it was any shorter, that chuck would run right into the stock. So there our holes have penetrated exactly in the middle like we wanted to. And now I'll put a screw in there just to show you. And I like to use the Roberts head, the square drive. Never have any problem with slippage when you put screws in and out with those. And when it gets all the way to the bottom, it'll just keep turning. It won't advance anymore because you've got that shank hole. As you can see there, that screw is not going to come up through the top when it's fully engaged. That's exactly what you want. That's why we use the specific screws we do, and we drill these holes in this specific way. So we're coming up on the end here, and this is going to be the end of our first advanced methods video. And look forward to seeing you on the next one.